Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, and in this video, I'm going to talk about the 8 grain Scotch Whisky Distilleries in Scotland. There are about 141 distilleries in Scotland. Only 8 of them are grain Scotch Whisky Distilleries. Now, 90% of Scotch Whisky is blends. 90% of what gets exported is blends, which means less than 10% is single malts. And yet, of the 141 distilleries, only 8 of them are grain Scotch Whisky Distilleries. And we as whiskey fans, enthusiasts, we tend to focus on single malts. That is what we love. Now, I did a 10-part series on Scotch Whisky production, then followed up with a video on grain Scotch Whisky production. And so I want to cover those 8 distilleries that we don't talk about, that aren't even open to the public, and they're using column stills rather than pot stills. If you haven't seen my video on grain Scotch Whisky production, you want to check out that video so you can know more about the distinctives of grain Scotch Whisky. The other thing with grain Scotch Whisky is most of them don't, as you'll see in the notes, most of them don't even bottle their own. You might be able to find some indies out there, some independent bottlers out there that have them, but a lot of it just goes into blends. Which is, all this is the reason why we as whiskey enthusiasts tend to not talk a whole lot about it. But there are some that I think are worth checking out, and one of them is the Invergordon 18-year-old. The core range is a 14, 18, and a 21-year-old, and I think it's worth checking out. But before I get into this, I'm going to give you my notes on all 8 grain Scotch Whisky Distilleries. If you are studying for exams for the Council of Whiskey Masters or any other organization, you're going to want to memorize all 8 of these, know who owns them, when they were founded, and perhaps what blended Scotch whiskies they go into. So you want to spend more time learning about grain Scotch whiskey and the distilleries than typically what is covered by whiskey tubers. All right, let's get into it. Cameron Bridge Distillery. Cameron Bridge Distillery is located in Fife in the Lowlands region of Scotland. The distillery was founded in 1824 by John Haig and is currently owned by Diageo. And the distillery has 3 column stills. In 1989, Cameron Bridge changed from being solely a large-scale grain whiskey distillery into a dual-purpose site when United Distillers Grain Neutral Spirit, or GNS, operation was transferred to Fife from Wandsworth in London. Grain neutral spirits for white spirits and sweetened products such as Archer's, Pimm's, Smirnoff, Tanqueray, and Gordon's Gin were also produced alongside grain spirit used in the Johnnie Walker, J&B, Bell's, Black and White, Vat 69, Haig, and Whitehorse blended whiskey brands owned by Diageo. But the grain neutral spirits column was later converted to a whiskey still, but remains capable of producing grain neutral spirits. Cameron Bridge Distillery is currently the largest of the remaining grain distilleries in Scotland. Distillery bottlings are hard to come by, but many independent bottlings are available. Currently available is the Cameron Bridge 26-year-old single grain Scotch whiskey. It was aged in a refill American oak bourbon cask. It's bottled at 56.2% alcohol by volume, and on the market I've seen it for over $300. Gan Distillery. Gan Distillery is located in the town of Girvan in South Ayrshire, Scotland. The distillery was founded in 1963 with the installation of its first coffee still. Under the supervision of Charles Grant Gordon, Gan Distillery was built and produced alcohol within 9 months of groundbreak. Gan Distillery is currently owned by William Grant & Sons. They source their water from the River Girvan and have 5 column still. The distillery is known as one of the largest and most energy-efficient distilleries in Scotland. Girvan contributes to Grant's and Clan MacGregor blended whiskies. The company introduced its first export single-grain whiskey, Black Barrel, in 1985 to Portugal, Spain, and Italy markets. Gan Distillery also produces Hendrick's Gin, which infuses not only the traditional juniper, but also cucumber and Bulgarian rose. Gan single grain Scotch whiskey is available through independent bottlers such as Old Particular, as well as official bottlings from the distillery, but they tend to be insanely expensive. Loch Lomond Grain Distillery. It's located in Alexandria, Scotland. It was founded in 1964 by the former owners of the Little Mill Distillery, and is currently owned by Loch Lomond Distillery Company. Loch Lomond Distillery is a Highland single malt and single grain Scotch whiskey distillery. They have 4 wash stills and 4 spirit stills for making malt whiskey and 3 column stills for making grain whiskey. Loch Lomond's core range of single grain Scotch whiskies include the Loch Lomond unpeated single grain Scotch whiskey, made from 100% malted barley in a continuous still and is bottled at 46% alcohol by volume. They also produce a Loch Lomond peated single grain Scotch whiskey, also made from 100% malted barley in a continuous still and bottled at 46% alcohol by volume. North British Distillery. North British Distillery is located in the Gorgie area of Edinburgh. The distillery was founded in 1885 and became operational in September 1887. North British Distillery was founded by Andrew Usher, William Sanderson, and John M. Krabbe. It is currently owned by Diageo and the Edrington Group. For Diageo, North British Distillery contributes to Johnnie Walker's blended Scotch whiskies, and for Edrington, it contributes to the famous Grouse blended Scotch whiskies. Reivers Distillery. Reivers Distillery is located in the Scottish Borders region south of Edinburgh. Reivers is the second active whiskey distillery to be opened in the Borders region in 150 years. It was founded in 2020. It's currently owned by Mossburn, which also owns Torvig Distillery on the Isle of Skye. Reivers uses 4 washbacks. They have a copper pot still and an 18-plate column still. Starlaw Distillery. Starlaw Distillery, sometimes known as Glenturner Distillery, is a grain whiskey distillery located at Bathgate in West Lothian, Scotland. The distillery was founded in 2010, is currently owned by La Martin Quesse, and is a subsidiary of the Glenturner Company. The distillery uses 5 column stills. The distillery is integrated with a vatting, blending, and bottling plant and has a capacity of 400,000 bottles per year. The distillery can produce 25 million liters a year and has 29 aging warehouses across 75 hectares at the distillery to allow for the maturation of over 600,000 barrels. Along with Glenmorangie Distillery in Speyside, it provides whiskey for the company's Cutty Sark and Label 5 blended Scotch whiskey brands. Strathclyde Distillery. Strathclyde Distillery is located in the Gorbals district of Glasgow, Scotland. It was founded in 1927 by Seager Evans and Company and is currently owned by Pernod Ricard. They have 2 column stills, which consists of an analyzer column and a rectifier column. The grain whiskey produced at Strathclyde is intended for developing blends, and as such, there is no official bottling. However, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, look for Distillery G10, and other independent bottlers have bottled this as single cask, single grain Scotch whiskey. Invergordon Distillery. Invergordon Distillery is located at Invergordon in Easter Ross and Cromarty, Highland, Scotland. It is the most northern grain whiskey distillery in Scotland. The distillery was founded in 1959 and started operation in 1961. Invergordon Distillery is currently owned by White and Mackay. Along with Tamnavulin Distillery in Speyside, Invergordon provides whiskey for the White and Mackay blended Scotch whiskey brands. Their water source is a Loch Glass. They have 3 coffee stills that are over 50 feet tall with a high ratio of contact between the still and alcohol vapor. Invergordon single grain Scotch whiskies are made from a mix of maize, that is corn, malted and unmalted barley, and locally sourced Scottish wheat. The Invergordon core range. The Invergordon 14-year-old single grain Scotch whiskey is Asian first fill and refill American white oak ex-bourbon cask. It has no added color, it is nitro filtered, and is bottled at 43% alcohol by volume. The Invergordon 18-year-old single grain Scotch whiskey It's aged in first fill and refill American white oak ex-bourbon cask. It has natural color, it is non-chill filtered, and is bottled at 43% alcohol by volume. And the Invergordon 21-year-old single grain Scotch whiskey. It was aged in a first fill and refill American white oak ex-bourbon cask. It has no added color, it's non-chill filtered, and is bottled at 46% alcohol by volume. So one of the things I find most interesting about these Invergordon bottles is the 14 and 18 are 43% alcohol by volume, whereas the third one is 46% alcohol by volume, but all of these are non-chill filtered and natural color. I don't know of any single malts under 46% alcohol by volume that can say that they're non-chill filtered and have natural coloring. The reason why is typically, they're worried about cloudiness and all that. And yet here is a grain Scotch whiskey, which actually has malted barley and unmalted barley in it that is, and other than being under 46% ABV, is an integrity bottling. But I don't think this whiskey needs to be a higher ABV, needs to be 46 or more, because I think it actually delivers quite a bit and is worth checking out. So on the nose, I get really intense and quite acute aromas of lemon, orange, so it's very citrus forward, a lot of vanilla. The maltiness shows up. It's very floral. Perhaps a little grassy character in there. But it's real nice, clean, fresh, and quite aromatic on the palate. On the palate, the nose is confirmed. Orange, lemon, a lot of vanilla. A very distinctive maltiness, that cereal character. Has a nice silky texture. It is I would describe it as light and refreshing. If you're looking for a breakfast dram, something light, refreshing, to replace your orange juice in the morning, this would really do the job. I think this has a nice fit for a summer whiskey. If you think of hanging out on the porch, drinking lemonade, but you want something with a little oomph in it, this would be a whiskey you might want to check out. If you're a bourbon fan, or someone's a bourbon fan and they like the heavier vanilla character to it, I think this is a whiskey worth checking out. Of course, if you want to make a cocktail, you can make a cocktail with it, but I think this is a nice whiskey that stands on its own. I think there could be a special niche for people who are grain Scotch whiskey enthusiasts, perhaps converts from bourbon, that would really go for this. Also, if you like Japanese whiskey, this whiskey is also sort of light and delicate, and I think has some real nice finesse to it. Tasted blind, I might mistake it for a Japanese whiskey, because it has that sort of character to it. All right, what am I giving in terms of score? Difficult to score because most of my scoring that I do is for single malts. And I really can't give this the same sort of judgment as you would a single malt. So I really like it. I think it's worth the price. I think it has a particular occasion, something light and refreshing. I've tried this on ice. It does fine just on ice. Still delivers a lot of flavor. Mouthfeel, it could be a little better. It's a little thin, but I think this is what to expect from grain whiskey. I think it has a nice long finish. It doesn't necessarily have a lot of variance or change from front and the middle into the finish. Pretty much the same all the way through. Starts off sweet, ends sort of a tart, sour character, like you might expect from something with lemons in it. And what sticks around is the vanilla. There's actually almost a slight banana and vanilla pudding character on the back end as well that I kind of like. What I'm going to give in terms of score, I'll go solid 89 points. Solid 89 points. Don't drink a lot of single grain Scotch whiskey. So in order to give it, I think, a better shake, I would need to taste a lot more. But as I just said, not a lot of distilleries are bottling their own, which means I have to start tasting a lot of independent bottles. This is the Compass Box Hedonism, which I really like. Similar in profile in terms of aromas and flavors as the Invergordon. The difference is, I think the Compass Box Hedonism has a silkier, rounder, creamier texture, but it's also at 43% alcohol by volume. Don't know if it's non-chill filtered or not. Nope, natural color, non-chill filtered, right here on the label. Super tiny, 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 tiny print, hard to read, but also non-chill filtered and natural color. What would I rather have between the Invergordon 18-year-old and the Compass Box? I like the creamy texture of the Compass Box, but I like the Invergordon's more heavier, maltier character to it. So that would be the greatest differences between the two and the strength to it. If you don't want to say, hey, you can have one bottle of the Invergordon or one bottle of the Hedon Box, the Hedon Box. The hedonism from Compass Box, or the Hedon Box as I like to call it, I would probably go with the Compass Box. I'd probably go with the Compass Box. But that being said, still, I want to highly recommend checking out Invergordon. I'd like to check out the older bottle, the 21-year-old at 46%, and see how it compares. But it's a little pricey. It's over $150. And at this point, I don't think I'm willing to pull the trigger on that one. All right, if you like watching my videos and you've not yet subscribed, actually subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I go live or I'll push a new video. And if you've had other grain whiskeys that you've liked, let me know down below. If you've tried the Invergordons, let me know what you think. And until next time, Sláinte. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.